All right, welcome to day 2 of doing remote instruction. Um, so, as you already know, you'll be kind of do a little bit of changes in our plans here since yesterday and today. Um, so, yesterday we did, instead of doing the GCA, we went over kind of these different methods of calculating a mortgage payment. So, we went over the general formula, which we did a couple examples on. And then we have this kind of speed chart, if you will, that allows you to kind of calculate the mortgage, but we're kind of restricted to certain interest rates, right? So we only have like these options. So if we had to do like a 3.75 that isn't on this table, for example. So depending on how specific the rate is, we might not be able to use this chart. Now, when it comes to like a quiz or a test, we're going to give you the chart if you need the chart. We're going to give you the equation if you need the equation. So, shouldn't be too bad for something like that. It'd be pretty obvious to know what you need to do. However, what we didn't talk about is kind of what is going on with the mortgage payment, right? So we kind of looked at calculating it, but didn't really dissect what the mortgage payment's actually doing. That's kind of going to bring us down to this topic called amortization. Okay, so amortization could actually be used outside of a mortgage example. So like car loans can be amortized. Essentially, the idea for amortization is you're trying to lump together your payment towards your principal and interest in one payment, and it's an equal payment throughout the entirety of the loan when you're paying it back. Okay, most popular you see amortization talked about is with paying off a mortgage. So the way it works is essentially, if you were to sign up to get when you buy, let's say you're buying a house and you apply for a loan, the lender has to provide this amortization table, and it's multiple pages dissecting every payment from payment 1 to payment whatever the end is. So let's say you did a 30-year loan, it would be all the way to payment 360, and it'll break down every payment on what that payment's doing. Because technically, what happens is over time, as you're paying part of that payment towards interest, and another part of that payment's going towards the principal, right? And the principal is changing because when you make your payment, you're owing less and less and less on the loan, right? Because you're paying it off. And so what the amortization does is it kind of gives you an idea, what every payment's doing. So every payment is broken down to a portion of principal and a portion towards interest. And that portion of principal reduces your debt, while the interest portion goes to the lender, essentially their pockets, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at exactly the process of an amortization table, kind of like what it's doing. Now, we're not going to make you do a whole 360 payment amortization table, because that would be a little ridiculous. But we're going to try to at least, if we start at step 1, can you show me step 1 and step 2? Or like payment 1, payment 2. Maybe we can look at a scenario where, maybe we're like halfway through paying, what's happening then. And what we're going to notice is over time, as you make these payments, the portion to principal is going to increase over time, and the amount of money you're paying the interest is going to decrease over time. Okay? And the way this works is based off of these 3 steps. Okay? So what's happening is the interest for that particular month is calculated based off, the remaining balance. Okay? So in the beginning, the remaining balance is high, so the interest is going to be higher, but as you make payments, that balance is going to decrease, which means the amount of interest you pay is going to decrease. Okay? And this is what happens from payment 1 all the way to payment, whatever the last payment is, 360 or 180, whatever. Now, it's a little tricky when we're trying to look at how it changes, because it's pretty much like a couple math problems inside of one problem. Now, it's not like super crazy. We're just doing basic arithmetic, so we got addition, subtraction, and multiplication going on here. Okay, so But the problem is the first answer is going to dictate the second answer, it's going to make the third answer, it's going to give you the fourth answer. So it's all interconnected. So if you mess up on step one, then all the other steps might be a little bit off. So you have to be careful what's going on there. Makes it fun for me to grade because, you might mess up step one, but you do all the rest of the steps right. So I have to kind of see, are you doing what you're supposed to do, right? So pretty much here's how it works. So the interest for that month, you take your previous balance, you multiply it by the interest rate, and you divide by 12 because we're doing, 12 payments in a year, right? So that's going to dictate what that interest should be. Then what's going to happen is if we know the payment, so we know the monthly payment, we can subtract that interest off of that payment, and now show us the payment on the principal only, okay? So the way this works is the principal portion of the payment is the total payment or the monthly payment minus the interest. So step one gives you the interest. Step two, we can take our payment minus an interest off, and the result is the principal. That's how much money is actually being paid toward your loan for that payment. And then step three is we need to recalculate what you owe now, right? Because in the beginning of the month, they mail you the bill, right? You take a look at the bill. It's whatever the payment is. You write your check, or, no one does that anymore. You log in online. Maybe you have an auto pay. You got some situation going on, right? So you got that payment, and you make the payment. And so what happens is these three steps are pretty much done automatically, right? Because the lender did all the work for you, right? You don't have to actually calculate this yourself. But, when you make that payment, let's say the payment was $1,500, you're not actually decreasing your loan by $1,500. You're decreasing it by whatever step two says, right? So if we know what step one is, we understand what step two is, then we can understand step three. So they're all interconnected and they build off each other, okay? So the one nice thing about these problems is it's a pattern. So it's very much a pattern. You kind of do the same thing over and over and over again. All right. Now, obviously, it's a little complicated. There's a couple different parts you have to keep track of. So we're going to try this first example and see, what we think. Okay. So in this example, we're looking at borrowing $250,000 to buy a house. We know the mortgage payment has an interest rate of 3.8% for 30 years. And they are actually giving us the payment. They're saying the payment is $1,164.89. So this is the big R, right? So if you remember from yesterday, we found big R. That is big R, okay? So when we're looking at this table, okay, and amortization kind of goes in a table format, before you make your first payment, you owe the entirety of the loan. Right, so right now the outstanding balance is $250,000 because you made 0 payments. So what's going to happen is on payment 1, we're first going to look at what the payment is, and we already know that answer. The payment is $1,164.89. That's what we're going to put here. Okay, so we got, oh boy, this thing wants to act funny. Hold on one second. All right, so do this back here. Cool. So our payment is going to be $1,600, or actually, hold on, I'm messing this up. This thing's throwing me off. Using a different platform to do this time around. Of course, wants to be tricky. All right, go a little bit slower. All right, so we're looking at, we'll pretend it's a money sign. $1,164. Come on. And 89 cents. Oh my gosh, this is going to be horrible. All right, so it's going to be $1,164.89. Okay, so that's going to be our first payment. And then what we're going to do is, for the next 3 columns, we're going to figure out, what is that interest portion. Then we're going to find out what that principal portion is. Then we're going to find out what the remaining balance is going to be. Okay, so we're going to take that payment, we're going to find the interest, find the principal, find the remaining balance. All right, so what I did is I transcribed all that in a thing that's going to be easier to write, so we're not going to be trying to sit here for 5 minutes for me to write a number on something that's not working. All right, so all I did there was I rewrote kind of our table. So the payment, we had the total payment, we had the principal portion we're going to find here next. And then I think I'm missing interest. Hold on. Yep, missing interest. Hold on a second. All right, now we got it all. So we have the interest payment. So what we're going to do next, we're going to do the interest payment. We're going to figure out what that interest is. And then from there, we're going to kind of be able to do the rest of what we got. Okay? All right, so on your table, we see the formula is for interest payment, I equals P times R over 12, okay? And so we're going to go ahead and figure out, what the interest is going to be. So we're going to take our principal, KP, which right now we owe $250,000. So that's our principal right now. So we're going to take this $250,000. We're going to multiply by our percent. Okay. So our percentage is going to be 0.038, right? And then we're going to go ahead and divide that whole answer by 12. Okay. So if we take our principal or our remaining balance, I usually like preferring that terminology. We can multiply by 0.038. So that's our interest rate. Then divide by 12. And what we get is the interest for the first payment is $791.67. Okay? So that's going to be our first payment. That's the interest. Okay? Now the principal portion is going to be the payment minus the interest. So what we're going to see here is what we're going to do is essentially we're going to take this minus this equals this number here. Okay? So I take $1,164.89 minus off that $791.67. The principal portion will be a measly $373.22. So on this first payment, we can see that there's very little going towards the principal. Okay, and that's pretty typical with a mortgage. Since there's so many payments, the very first couple payments, you're barely changing what you owe. Okay? Now, it is going down, but it's not going down by much. And what's going to happen next is I'm going to do this in... let's do purple. What's going to happen next is we got to figure out our remaining balance. So we're going to take our previous balance. We're going to go here to the principal portion. We're going to subtract that. And then that answer is going to be popping up over here. Okay? So, if we owed $250,000, but we're technically paying off $373.22, the remaining balance will be $249,626.78. Okay? And this will be the remaining balance. That's only payment 1. Okay, on payment 2, we're going to do it again. Payment, still the same. So through amortization, okay, the payment's always the same. Sometimes the last payment could be a little different, but all their payments are the same. But now what's going to happen is our interest is going to change, right? Because we used $250,000 to get this number, but now we're looking at the new balance, okay? Not the shoe, but this price here. So this is our new balance, okay, after we made our first payment. So this is how the interest is calculated, okay? So in this box here, okay, for the interest payment for payment 2, we're taking the new balance of $249,626.78 times our interest rate of 0.038 divided by 12. And so what's going to happen is our interest payment is going to go down slightly. So we get $790.48. Okay. So this would be our new interest payment. So it went down by like $1.20 just about. Okay. So it went down a little. It's not going down very quickly, but it does decrease. And since this interest payment decreases, our principal payment is going to increase. Okay, so again, just like we did before, okay, I'm going to take the total payment minus the interest payment, gives me my principal portion. So we take 1164.89 minus $790.48. So the new principal would be, or portion of principal, would be $374.41. Okay. Now, this is our new portion of principal. Okay, it's going to increase for every payment, so that's pretty typical. Now, this amount is going to be changing our previous balance, right? So, before we make the payment, this was our balance, this $249,000 and some change. We're going to take that number minus our payment, principal payment. It's going to give us another new balance. Okay? So if I take the previous balance of $249,626.78 and I minus off our interest is $374.41. So this big number minus a smaller number, we're going to get a balance of $242,252.37. And this pattern keeps on going and going and going and going. Okay, so essentially every time you make a payment, this is the calculation. They take your payment, they figure out how much goes to the principal or how much goes to interest. That determines how much goes to principal. That reflects a change in the balance. And you do it again and again and again and again and again and again and again. Right, so this is pretty much what happens through every payment. Okay. Now, when you sign up for, a loan to buy a home, they will provide you with literally multiple pieces of paper, front and back. It's gonna be like, it's at least 5 pages or something. Could be more than that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it will show you every payment in this breakdown through that whole paper. Okay, the whole thing. So it will show you your payment number. It will show you the payment. It will show you the interest. It will show you the principal. It will show you the remaining balance for every payment. Okay, and so when you start paying the loan, there's no questions because you literally have the whole breakdown on your paper. Okay, so they have to give that to you before closing. Okay, so this kind of gives you an idea, kind of how it's working. Okay, so there's no questions on what is my payment really doing. They try to be pretty, responsible with making sure you understand, what your money's going towards. Okay. And this is pretty much how it looks. All right. Now, again, we're not going to make you do a whole amortization chart because that would be crazy. Okay. But, we are expecting you to be able to at least do the first 2 steps. Or our next example is going to be, what if we give you 2 middle steps? Can we do the same thing? Okay. So, it's the same process. Start in the middle. But the numbers are a little bit different. Okay, so we'll take a look. So this next example, they weren't so nice enough to give us the actual payment, so we're going to calculate that first. What we're going to do is once we have that payment, we're going to actually figure out, how is payment 181 looking, payment 182 looking, and then we're going to figure out how much interest you paid over the entirety of the loan. Okay? Um, so, start off with part A. Okay? So, we'll go back to the actual thing we're going to write our stuff on. We're going to scroll down just a hair. Perfect. Okay. So, we are doing a loan for this very specific amount. Okay, 200. So it's $226,236. Okay, so our principal, this example, is going to be $226,236. Our rate, they said, was 6%, so that's 0.06. And time should be 15 years. Just double check, make sure I'm not crazy. It's 30 years, disregard me. So it's going to be for 30 years. Okay. So we're going to see if we can calculate that payment. Okay. And actually, let me check one thing here because this is kind of weird. I think it's supposed to be 15. This might be a typo. Now I'm looking at it. Okay, no, we're good. So it is 30. All right, perfect. All right, making sure we ain't messing anything up. All right, so what we're going to do is we need to calculate this payment first, okay? And based off that payment, that's going to allow us to actually do the table, okay? So our formula is we got big R equals, so we go back, it's going to be our principal times our interest rate over 12, okay? You should look kind of familiar. So it's going to be essentially 226,236 over 0.06 over 12. Okay, so that would be the top number. Bottom number is 1 minus in parentheses. And it's going to be 12 over 12 plus R. So it's 12 divided by 12.06. So again, if we're adding the rate to 12 and our rate 30.06, it's just 12.06. And the top is going to be 12 times 30. Okay, so this is a good recap from what we did yesterday. So on top, we just had 236 times 0.06 divided by 12. So the top number is going to be 1,131.18. The bottom number is going to be 0.833958 0.72. So if I divide both of these with each other, we should get our payment every month to be $1,356, and it rounds to 40 cents. So it's 0.399, so it rounds to 40 cents. And again, this is per month. All right, so this is going to be our payment. Now, if that's our payment, what that's going to be allow us to do is figure out how to fill in this table. Now, what's weird about this table is we already paid 15 years of the loan. Okay? So what it's saying is you've been paying your mortgage for 15 years. Okay? Your current balance at the end of this 15 years is $161,287.77. Can we fill out the next 2 months on the table? Okay? So, we already know the payment, right? We just did that for part A. So we're going to figure out the interest. We're going to take that interest, use our payment for part A to fill out the next section. Okay? And then from there, we're going to go figure out the balance of the principal. Okay? So if we go back, so we have payment number. So we're at 181, and we're going to do 182. So first step is we need our interest. Okay, so for our interest here, it's based off what we have as the remaining balance. So we go back, and we see our remaining balance is $161,287.77. So I'm literally going to take this balance right here, this 161,000. I'm going to multiply it by our percent, 0.06, and divide that by 12. So what it's going to give us as an interest in this case is $806.44. Okay, that's going to be our interest. Now, so the part that's going towards the principal here is going to be our payment minus the interest, right? So if our payment is $1,356.40, but we know we are spending $806.44 of that in interest, the principal would be $549.96. Okay, and then the balance. So our balance is going to be what we started with to calculate this interest minus this principal. So again, we're going to use $161,287.77 minus this principal. So the balance will be $160,773.81. Okay, so it doesn't matter if I'm at payment 1 or 181. Okay, as long as I know the balance and our interest rate and our payment, we can pretty much continue anywhere. Okay, so we use that payment and this interest to get the principal. Okay, and from that principal, we were able to reduce the balance. Again, let's go ahead and try to do payment 182. I should expect it to be less in interest but more in principal. So I'll take 160,737.81 times 0.06 divided by 12. The interest for this payment number 182 will be $803.69. If we use that to minus off from our payment, we do get a new principal, which is a little bit higher than the previous one, of $552.71. So again, we took this balance we found for the previous payment, used it to find our interest, use that interest to find the principal. We use this principal to find the new balance. So if I take 160,737.81, we minus off 552.71. The balance after making payment 182 will be 160. So $160,185.10. Okay. So for part A, we had to find the payment. Okay, so this is the part A part here. Should label this. This is the part B answer here. Okay, so we needed to know this answer, right, in order to do the payment. So we had to make sure we, went ahead and did that first. One, because we needed to, but for the answer part A, but we needed that to understand the rest of this. Because if we didn't know the payment, we couldn't really do anything. I mean, you need to have the payment and you need to have the balance in order to actually do this. Okay, so you need kind of both of these to help us find all the pieces. Now, part C is asking about how much interest is paid over time. Okay, Now, you could, if you knew all the numbers in the amortization chart, you can add up this interest column, but we don't have that. So we're going to do it the other way. So for part C, what is the total interest? This is the question. So the total interest is going to be 1, figuring out the total payment, and then we're going to minus off what we borrowed. Okay, so first off, we need to know the total spent, which is equal to our payment, $1,356.40. We make that payment 12 times for 30 years. So we multiply all this out. This would be the total paid. I'm going to add that in there. This is the total paid. So this is including principal and interest together. This is a combination. Let's take $1,356.40 times 12 times 30. We do get the total paid to be $488,304. Now the interest will be this total minus we borrowed. If we go look in the beginning here, right, we have a original balance, right? This is how much we borrowed in the beginning. Okay, this is getting paid off to zero through the whole cost of the loan, but this is paid back entirely plus the interest. So if I go through here and I take that total here and I minus that off, okay, this total paid minus the original principal, or the original loan amount, this result will be the answer we're looking for total interest. So our interest I will be equal to our total here minus the principal, the original principal. So if we do that real quick, we see that the total interest in this particular circumstances is $262, or $262,068. Okay. Now this is an example where we're showing you payments in the middle of the cycle of the loan. Okay, so this wasn't the first two payments. This is payments made in the middle. Okay, so when we're doing a question like this and you're provided the table, okay, you're either going to start in the beginning or start in the middle. Okay, either way doesn't matter. We are looking at that previous balance. That's going to affect the interest. That interest is going to affect the amount going to the principal, because our payment is always principal plus interest. Okay, so these combined should always be your payment. And the principal is going to reduce the balance. Okay, so the interest goes straight towards the lender's pocket. The principal goes towards your balance. Okay, that's pretty much how it works every time. Now, these are the last couple examples we're going to do on amortization. But real quick, I'm going to show you what is up and coming. So if we look on page 18, okay, there are some other things here that we can consider that happen in the process of buying a home. Okay, so some things are like, there's different types of loans. So you have these ARMs, or adjustable rate mortgages. Essentially, the rate can change during the loan, which does affect the interest, right? So what happens in these circumstances is you use one R for part of the problem and then a new R for another part. Okay, we're not going to do any of those like together, but essentially that's how it works. Is through the amortization process, they just change the interest rate that's used part of the way through, and this can change every year, every 3 years, every 5 years. Usually you only would do an ARM like this if you're optimistic that the interest rates are going down over time. So like you might be paying, let's say, 6% now, and then in 5 years maybe it goes down to like 4%, and in 5 more years it goes down to 3.5% or whatever. It's a little bit risky sometimes you can do things where it can change the interest rate, but then you can freeze it. There's some things there, and it gets to be different ways you can do that. And sometimes it gets higher over time. Sometimes it starts at a low rate and it changes to increase. There's also those two. Another thing that people don't really consider when purchasing a home, the payments in there. We also have these closing costs. So, when you're buying a home and you're lending, the lender has fees. Go figure. They're already making money off interest, but guess what? They're socking it to you some more, right? So they have these like origination fees. Okay, that's essentially they're charging you to process the paperwork. So, yeah, gotta make more money. You can have underwriting fees that's usually paid to like lenders, and it can also be paid towards underwriters, lenders. You also have attorney fees. You have taxes. Okay, so sometimes depending on the situation, like for example in South Carolina, we pay property tax in the beginning of the year, or before the year starts. So if you were to sell your home, let's just say in June, right, you paid for the whole year. So what happens is the buyer has to pay you back for the remainder of the year. So that's something you have to pay sometimes when you buy a house. Typically when you close, you have to wire funds to the attorney, or sometimes it could be to someone else, but usually, at least in South Carolina, it's to the attorney, and the attorney takes care of it from there. But there's usually a fee for that, right? You got title work, because that's very important, by the way, because the title for the home kind of makes sure that there's no funny business going on, right? So, for example, if you're buying a home, you do want to make sure the person you're buying it from actually owns it, right? And there's no issues there. And there's definitely sometimes things kind of go weird where, there's a kind of a break in the line of when the home was transferred to people. And, that's why the attorney is paid to do these things. It's called a title search. And they try to make sure that, the person that you're buying it from, and there's a clear line from, where they got it from, where that person got it from, where that person got it from. So no one can't show up 100 years later and say, well, technically my great-great-grandfather owned that house and he never sold it, and so it's mine, and then there's a dispute over ownership of the property. It's a little crazy, but stuff like that happens. And there's all these different fees here. So you can see under this example of closing costs here in the center, this is just an idea of what some of those things can cost. Okay, but I do real estate, so this is stuff that's all pretty typical. And there's sometimes some other things that can pop up, but and also like if you're using an agent, there's fees there too that can all pop up there. Okay, so when you're doing this, buying a home, you have to make sure the down payment. You got to make sure you can afford the actual mortgage payment, and then you got to make sure you have the money for your closing costs. So it's all kind of lumped together. And then one other thing here is sometimes you can have what's called an escrow, okay? And the way that works and what that means is you can have your mortgage payment include things like taxes, insurance. Okay, so when you're paying your taxes every year, some people, and I personally do this, where instead of trying to remember to save for the taxes at the end of the year, you could just pay more money on your mortgage, and the bank kind of facilitates that for you. So what they do is they take that money and they put what's called an escrow account, and the escrow account's only used for that purpose that's entitled for. So, for example, it'd be used to pay for taxes and maybe property insurance. And what happens is, the government who's charging the property tax, and then the insurance will be paid from that account. Okay. And, the lender kind of monitors that for you, and it saves you a lot of headaches, right? Because, last thing you want to do is, you have a fun time during the year, and then you get your tax bill and you go, wait a minute, I don't have $1,500 to pay this right now because I just bought a new car, or something happens, right? Or you had some medical school expenses, or something kind of came up, right? So, it's a pretty popular option is to include these in there. But these are kind of extra things to kind of think about, right? And so what we're going to do is, next time we kind of cover 13.4, we can calculate the mortgage payment, but we can also add in these extra things, right? We can add in the taxes, we can add the insurance into the payment and see, what does it actually cost in total, right? So that's what we're about next time. Okay, so again, we covered amortization here, filling out this wonderful, nice table everyone loves. And again, it's a little different. It's not like super hard per se, because you're not doing anything like really nuts when it comes to the math side of things. It's more like organizing. The organization of it is kind of a little bit tricky because there's a lot of things connected to each other, and you just got to take it slow, especially the first time doing it. Okay. So there's definitely some problems like this on MyMathLab you can take a look at. When we do GCA2, we're going to be kind of doing these kind of calculations again. So you're definitely going to practice there. But, hopefully we actually still meet again on Friday. We should know sometime here later about that, if we are meeting on Friday or not. But, as long as we still meet on Friday, the plan's going to be we'll do GCA2 together on Friday. We'll do, GCA1. We'll do GCA1 together on Friday. And that gives you time to work on that. Again, that's on material 13.1 and 13.2. And then we'll go ahead and push that quiz back to Monday, if that's the case. And then on Monday, we'll finish up 13.4. We'll start looking into 15.1. And then, the goal is to still do GCA2 by the end of next week. Okay? So far, the schedule is not really, that messed up, or just doing things in a different order. So we're not really losing time here, which is a good thing. We're just kind of reorganizing it, right? So if you have any questions, make sure you let me know. I know this is one of those things that people get a little bit confused on. And again, it's not because it's like the math is hard. It's just a lot going on. Okay? So I'd recommend maybe looking it over once, twice, 3 times even. We can go over this again in class on Friday if we need to spend a couple minutes on it. That's not really much of a problem. Okay? But if you have any questions, let me know. Besides that, hopefully we meet again on Friday, and we'll see you then.